All right, so let's talk about group performance and let's talk about the types of activities that groups can engage in. So there are additive tasks. Those are tasks where all of the members of the group carry their weight, put it all together, and really success is a measure of everybody's individual contribution and effort. So everybody contributes to add up to this final outcome. Conjunctive tasks are tasks where you only do as well as your weakest member does. So I'm thinking of like the Amazing Race. They're just running in pairs, but if they're having like a foot race to the finish line to determine who checked in first at the checkpoint, your time stops when your slowest member gets to the mat. And so there's no point in ditching your member, really. Like, you might as well stay together, because you getting there first while we wait for your colleague to get there, we're still only measuring it by your colleagues. So the least competent member is the most important, really, in determining success or failure in these kind of conjunctive tasks. Disjunctive tasks are ones where success depends on the most competent member. And so you might see, for example, on Survivor, where they have these team challenges where, for example, they're supposed to throw a ball through a hoop. If one of them is really good at it, that person can sit there and keep throwing the ball through the hoop until they miss or until, they win. We don't have to bring these weaker members up and make them take a turn at it. It's not the sum of everybody. It really is just whether this group, at least one of you, manages to accomplish this task. Like, that's a disjunctive task. Subdivided tasks are tasks that require some skill and some coordination among the team members. And so we need the competent members and their skills. We need the individual person's efforts to all work together. And so, we have to pull that least competent member up to get them to put in as much effort as they can. So these subdivided tasks are ones where it's kind of a combination of all three of these things, right? All of the three of the previous ones. So it's kind of an additive, conjunctive, disjunctive kind of situation where, the most competent member can carry us a lot of the way, but we really do need everybody to be contributing to the final outcome. So one thing that we do with groups oftentimes is we'll ask them to brainstorm. We'll say, all right, you guys, here's the topic. Come up with everything you can think of that has to do with this topic. And we're going to give you, 3 minutes to come up with as many things as you can think of on this topic. It seems like a really great strategy. And I remember it really being a hot thing in like the 70s and the 80s. They were really, these brainstormings really get the juices flowing, and we'll get all sorts of creativity coming out of brainstorming. It turns out brainstorming is not a very good strategy. If you're ever in a managerial position or you're ever the leader of a group, I strongly recommend that you not try and get your group to brainstorm. Individuals usually produce more and better ideas when they work alone than the group comes up with when they've been challenged to brainstorm. I think the best thing you can do is like a hybrid of brainstorming and individual performance. I'll give you an example. I was the service unit manager for my daughter's, Girl Scout council area where our troop was. And so I was like the person who would convey information from council to the leaders. So that was like my job. So I had to go to these, it was my volunteer position. So I had to go to these monthly service unit manager meetings. And they would send us the agenda beforehand, but they wouldn't tell us necessarily what we were going to be doing. It was just, so these are the topics we're going to be talking about. So we would get to those meetings, and oftentimes you'd be seated with just whoever else was at the table. I didn't know these people. They were all, from different service units. And depending on when you arrived, you just sat wherever. So it wasn't like we had a cohesive group or anything. We would just be in this temporary group for tonight. And then we would be told, okay, this is a problem that's facing the council right now. So with the group at the table, discuss possible solutions, ideas you might have for dealing with the problem. And so here you are with these 3 strangers and you trying to talk about this thing that was just thrown at you that you didn't even know was an issue, and you're supposed to come up with ideas. That is like the worst format for brainstorming I can imagine. I told the council, you guys, this is what you need to do. You need to tell us ahead of time that this is the issue that you're struggling with, and tell us to come prepared with 3 or 5 ideas that we think might be a way to handle it. And then we can take those 3 to 5 things and discuss them with our groups. We can all pull out our lists. We can all talk about what we came up with. We can like narrow down any things that we all had in common at our own table and say, okay, this seems like a pretty common solution, so maybe we should call that solution number 1, right? And the group can kind of work that out at the table. Then we can figure out which things we want to shout out for the larger whiteboard conversation. So what I would like to recommend to you, if you're ever in charge in these situations, is to forewarn the group members and ask them to bring their list, because you'll probably get more creativity, better ideas. Here we have a little cartoon where the CEO says, what if this time more heads has made us more stupid, right? Because sometimes when you're in a group, I mean, more heads is better than one is an aphorism for a reason. I mean, we do tend to benefit from working with a group. But in the context of brainstorming, honestly, the best thing to do is have everybody think independently and then bring it together, rather than trying, because people self-censor and they do all sorts of stuff when they're sitting at a table with 4 people at it. So if you want those ideas to emerge, you really need to give them time to do it on their own. One of the things, like I just said, happens in brainstorming is this biased use of information. So when one person suggests an idea and then another person says, oh yeah, that was my idea also, we all start to focus on that shared information instead of thinking to ourselves, well, what else could we think about? What other solution? Instead of coming up with the consensus solution, brainstorming is supposed to give us like lots of options. We're supposed to put up all the ideas and then talk about them once we have all of them up there, rather than as soon as like 2 people agree on something, now we start talking about that one thing. People in groups tend to focus on shared information more than unshared information. So the one person who wants to say something different probably will self-censor and not say the different thing, because everybody now is talking about this one shared idea. And so we end up with biased use of that information. If we had explored all the possible interpretations, we might come to a better solution. A lot of times in these brainstorming sessions, these meetings are being used to confirm the strategy that's already been chosen, or the group members' initial beliefs, rather than challenging those initial beliefs. Like, the purpose of brainstorming is to see if we can come up with something better, not just come to the conclusion that the one thing that's already been offered is the best we can come up with, and I guess this is what we're doing, right? So with brainstorming, I would like to say, I already mentioned, have them think of it before, have them bring it to the meeting. If you really want to avoid this biased use of information, you will have people anonymously place their ideas, one per piece of paper or whatever, into some kind of hat or bucket or something, and then have your meeting going on while some other person is over here sort of compiling all the strips of paper, figuring out themes, putting it all on a whiteboard, so that we can get all the, there will be a lot of people coming up with the exact same solution to the problem. So you can kind of collapse those all into, okay, that's one idea. And then you'll have people who are thought out of the box a little bit more, and those need to get up on the whiteboard, because that's how you'll avoid those biased interpretations where you go, well, it looks like we're all in agreement. 10 of us all came up with the one same answer, so it must be the answer. Let's explore the creativity and come up with the best answer, not just the most common answer. So that's my last tip. If you're ever in charge of a group, literally have them come in with their ideas written on separate pieces of little slips of paper, however you want, and have them put it into some kind of receptacle. And some non-interested person compiles that all together and puts it on the whiteboard. You could even make it even easier on yourselves and set up a little survey monkey survey ahead of time, have people type their answers in, and then you process the Excel spreadsheet, and ta-da, we've got this now for the meeting up on the whiteboard. Everything's all organized, and you could have a really productive conversation rather than a biased conversation. All right. Now, group polarization is where group discussion may actually lead to more extreme decisions. A lot of times when we have debates or we have presentations by somebody who's going to provide the other side to an argument. If you know that your audience sort of leans this way, well, bring in a speaker who leans the other way, and that speaker, the goal is to sort of moderate the opinions of the audience who already had their attitude in place. Well, come to find out, these processes actually cause people to become more extreme in their opinions. Group polarization. If you have a group that is evenly split on some topic, I'll just give you a dumb example. Let's say, the PTA is trying to decide whether to raise money by having a book sale or having a bake sale. So these are our two choices. And let's say pretty much 50% want a bake sale and 50% want a book sale. If it's balanced like that, and honestly, you've got like even numbers, people are more motivated to compromise than to polarize, because they realize, okay, we're at a stalemate. Half of us want a bake sale and half of us want a book sale. Either we have to have both of them, but if we can only have one, we're going to have to figure out what can we do. Like maybe we could have a combination book and bake, or we have different, like how can we come up with a solution? Because there's no way we're going to convince half of the people to come over to our side. Like it's just not going to work. So compromise is more likely when there is an even split, but that's not how it usually works in groups, is it? Where it's literally half and half. Think about Congress, how often it's like one party really is dominating the other party. And so the party that's in charge can kind of just steamroll and become more and more extreme. Just kind of steamroll the other party because they have the votes to just outvote them. Right? So we aren't going to compromise. We're just going to polarize. So how can we make it more likely that compromise will occur? Persuasive arguments theory says that the reason why an even group compromises is because they are more open to the new information, because they're realizing I can't just force my opinion on the entire other side. So they're more open to the new information. They're more willing to hear, I don't know, maybe a detail about how a book sale would go and be less trouble than a bake sale, or that it actually would raise more money than a bake sale, something like that. And they're like, oh, you know what? I was open to the new information because I realized that I can't just keep, sort of forcing my own idea. So I get persuaded by the argument more because I'm open to the new information. Now, self-presentation theory talks about why polarization happens when you have uneven numbers. Polarization happens because a lot of times we're trying to one-up the other side's arguments. And so, if I know that I have the numbers behind me, and you've tried to make a really good case for why the bake sale makes more sense, but you're in the minority, I may come up with like a very quick retort to explain why that benefit that you just said is not really a benefit, or that my idea is actually way better than the one. Like the whole time you're talking, I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm trying to think of how I can one up you. I'm trying to think of how I can really make the case for my book sale. And so I'm not really listening to your information because I want to present myself as the smart person who knows how to make the most money for the PTA. Social identity theory says that, group members try to conform to the group, but they're perceiving the group norm as more extreme than their own opinion. It's hard to imagine how my bake sale versus book sale is an extreme position, but it's just, that the other side is maybe more entrenched, that the other side is more negative towards the thing that I believe in. So I believe it should be a book sale. I think this makes the most sense. And I'm viewing the other group as their view of the bake sale being beneficial as being more intractable, or something more extreme about it, right? Like they're worse than I am. They won't even hear reason, right? And so with the self-presentation theory and the social identity theory, there's this resistance for hearing the other side's argument, this resistance to internalizing the other side's argument, and this just weddedness to my own argument. right? I'm not being persuaded by the arguments like in the first level, but instead I'm all bound up in this other stuff. And that's what can make the two sides just become like intractable. Like, this is never going to work. There's nothing we can do. We just don't see eye to eye. And so we get more and more entrenched in our group's ideas. All right, I'm going to stop here and we're going to come back and wrap up with group. Actually, hold on. I'm going to do a little peek before I said that. Yeah, okay. Because there is a video I'm going to show to illustrate this, but I want to define it and make it really clear, and then we'll watch a video. So I will see you guys in the next segment.